My name is Brittany Bead, and today I'm going to teach you how to make this wonderful In the Mood 3-wrap bracelet. The materials that we'll need for this project: a design board. This is great. We're going to be strapping this project up to this board so that we can kind of keep everything contained. I have cord, two different types. One is tough cord in gold, size 2, but 1, 2, or 3 will work. I have Chinese knotting cord, some Indian leather in 1.0 in gold. I have an array of beads here. I've got my button. We've got mirage beads here. These are the color changing ones. I have a couple of 6/0 seed beads, and I've got my 11/0 seed beads in ivory pearl Ceylon. I have a couple of tools and essentials that we'll need. First of all, the design board behind here. I have my thread zap too. I've got my GS Hypo cement here, thread snips, and my grandmother's old trusty tape measure. This is the project that we're going to be doing. We start with the button loop, and as you can see, there is some macrame around this button loop here. It's a spiral macrame technique, which you will also learn. I move then into my first mirage bead, which is covering both strands of leather. I am laddering here a little bit of the 11/0 and then some of the 6/0 seed beads. And then we've brought the two pieces of leather back together again and slid on another mirage bead, continued to ladder, and this is where we change up the techniques. Macrameing as a transition, and then moving into a herringbone weave with my Chinese knotting cord. Another transition point where I'm macrameing, and this time I'm adding 11/0 beads. Going back into a herringbone weave with a separate color, and breaking it up with another laddering portion. Back to macrame, back to herringbone, and then I finish with my button. Step 1, I'm going to cut our leather. I cut mine 60 inches, and we're going to begin the first portion, which is a macrame technique to create the button loop. I'm going to bend my leather at the halfway point here, making sure my tails are equal length, and then just take my button, measure at the midway point, the widest point of the button, making sure the shank is also in there. And I'm going to hold with my fingers exactly where that point is, slipping the button back out. And I'm going to take just a regular old pen and I'm going to mark where I'm going to be macrameing in between. See, there's one little marking here, there's one little marking here. I'm going to then take this piece of leather and I'm going to tie it around my design board in an overhand knot. Don't pull too tightly, you don't want to mar your leather. You just want it to be nice and taut for your first step. So I have my piece of leather strapped up to the board, and I made these markings just a little darker so that you could see them. I have marked from here to here, which is going to be this portion of our bracelet where we're doing a spiral macrame technique. I take my tough cord. Okay, I've cut my 36 inches or 1 yard of this tough cord bonded nylon material. Bend it in half, and I'm going to bring it underneath my base cord, which is this leather here, and I'm going to start my first macrame knot. I'm going to start that by bringing my right side of my cord, crossing it over, just like so, bringing my left tail over the cord I just brought over, underneath, up, and through that loop, pulling my tail, and I've started my very first knot. Now this is a reverse macrame technique that's going to create a spiral, so we're going to continue that same knot over and over and over again. So I'm taking my right piece, crossing it over my base cord, bringing my left tail over that cord I just brought over, under the base cord, up and through this loop. Making sure to slide this exactly where that marking was. I'm going to repeat. One way to remember this is to think of P's and Q's. So I'm going to create a P right here, bringing my right tail over, bringing my left tail over under, up and through the loop, tightening. I've brought this in so that you can see closer what I'm doing. So as you can see, I'm continuing the same pattern until I reach my destination, which is this second marking down here. Over, under, through, right side, over base chords, left side, over, under, through. As you see, the chords will want to rotate. You can just go with it. And this is how you create a spiral macrame knot. So now I have completed my macrame technique from one side to the other. I'm going to take a little bit of my hypo cement, just right here, don't need very much, right at the ends of those cords. Let that dry. Then I'm going to slide my whole project off the board. Bend this in half. I just want to make sure that my button's going to pass through. And it does. That passes through perfectly. So, at this stage, I've let my glue dry. I'm just going to take my simple thread snips and I'm going to cut right there at the end. Go back later with my thread burner if you have one handy. Push the button and just cauterize the very tip of those cords so they don't go anywhere. Next step, we're going to bend it in half, and I'm going to take one of my mirage beads and I'm going to slide that on. Now at this stage you can see we're going to go into another macrame technique and we're going to start laddering our beads on. I'm going to strap this up to the board so that I can start laddering. Wrap it underneath the ultimate design board. But oh no, it's not long enough to reach each other. So what I'm going to do is towards the ends of these tails, I'm just going to take them both, do an overhand knot, just like so, to join them together. I'm going to take a miscellaneous piece of string I have here. I'm using this faux suede that I've had forever, but you can use rat tail. And I'm going to slide my cord through the loop, through the button loop, through the loop we just made. And to keep the tension nice and even, I'm going to do an overhand knot. Just like that, pulling kind of tight, but not too tight. And then I'm just going to do a simple bow. You can do a double knot if you'd like. And then I'm just going to move this whole entire, shift this whole entire piece up so I can start working. At this point, we're going to begin our laddering portion of our bracelet by reintroducing the tough cord into a new macrame knot, which we'll call the alternating macrame knot. Very similar to what we just did, except for we alternate sides. And then we're going to move into laddering with our 11/0 seed beads to graduate into our 6/0 seed beads. I've cut 3 yards of my tough cord and bent it in half. I'm going to bring my tails underneath the base cords, making sure that each side is equal length. Then I'm going to begin macrameing, very much like I did before, bringing the right side over the base cords, the left cord underneath, up and through to begin my first macrame knot, sliding that up to where I want it to be, which is right there. Now instead of using the same side, we're going to go for our left cord is going to form a Q. It's going to go over our base cords. Our right side is going to go underneath, up, and through. As you can see, this is going to want to move around on you at first, but as you create knots, it'll tighten up. So now we're going to alternate. Right side is going to form a P, left side under, up and through. Basic macrame techniques. And instead of creating a spiral, it's going to create a flat knot. The way that you'll be able to tell where you left off is right here. I've got a little vertical bump. So that's going to indicate that my right side is going to form a P. Going to bring my left tail under, up, and through. And now the vertical bump moves over to the other side, to the left side. So if I get up and walk away from my project and I forgot where I left off, I just have to look for this, and that'll tell me that I need to start with this string. Under, up, and through. Now we're only introducing this macrame technique for a few knots because we're going to then take those cords and begin the laddering process. I've got both of my tails here. I'm going to begin by bringing them in between the legs of my leather, up and through, and I'm going to repeat that step one more time. Both of the legs around, under, up, and through. Going to find the end of my tough cord here. I'm just going to take my thread burner and slide my thread through to where I want it to be, and I'm going to push the button until it cinches, and that'll kind of cauterize the end there. I'm going to start by putting on one of my 11-aught seed beads, just like so. I strung it through. Now I'm going to find my other tail, the end of my other tail on the left side, and I'm going to go back through that bead, that same hole, in the opposite direction this time, just like so. So as you can see, I've got two pieces of thread going through this one bead in opposite directions. I'm going to pull the tails top. It's got a little ways to travel because the tails are so long at first. And I'm just going to tighten it. Now as I'm going to graduate to a larger bead, I'm going to put on two beads. But first I'm going to wrap under, up and through the legs in between. I'm going to take my right tail right here, slide on two 11-aught Miyuki seed beads. My tails are going this way, and then I'm going to take my other left tail, and I'm going to bring that string through the same two beads, but going in the opposite direction. And then as I pull taut, these are nestled nicely inside of there. I'm going to do that one more time. Now we're going to phase into our larger 6-aught seed beads. I have two different color golds, so I'll start with my shiny. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my tails up, under, and through. Take one of my Miyuki seed beads, string it on, take my other tail over here, back in the opposite direction of that bead, and you'll notice there's a lot more wiggle room, but as you start laddering, that'll get less and less wiggly. Repeat that for about 12 or 13 beads. I'm going to break it up by laddering on one of my mirage beads, and I'm going to continue with my other color of 6-aughts until I go back down and taper back through with the 11-aughts. Alright, so I've laddered on 12 beads, and now I want to add one of these little mirage beads right in the center, like I'm going to do right here. So I'm going to slide on two of my Miyuki 11-aughts. So I've tapered it back down. Now at this point, I brought my cords under, up, and through, and I'm going to do one simple little macrame knot just to hold everything in place. But I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to take my design off the board, and then I'm going to slide this mirage bead, which will accommodate both pieces of leather because it's got a large enough hole, onto my bracelet. Alright, at this point I have taken my project off the board, and now I want to make my leather tails. I've had to untie my knots. I'm going to make my leather tails go through my bead. The best way to do that is to take both ends, take some sharp shears, and angle cut your two pieces. Then you're going to slide on your bead. It's going to go on much easier, and then just kind of push. You can kind of push and twist. That'll help. But we got both through just fine. So I'm going to slide this up. Take my time, get all these cords through, feeding it towards the center here. Pushing it. Success. So, we got all of our cords going through that mood bead now. Now we're going to basically just recreate the ladder pattern that we did before by tapering in. You can just start wrapping around. We're at this point here in the game. So I'm going to repeat by laddering these here, going into a couple of 6/0, finishing, tapering off, and doing another flat macrame stitch. As you can see, I've completed my laddering portion. Now I'm going to jump right back into a macrame stitch. I've got my last bead on there, going to go under, up, and through like we do. And then I'm going to jump into a simple alternating macrame before I transition into our final technique that we'll be covering, our herringbone weave. At this stage, we're going to go into our herringbone weave with our 0.8 Chinese knotting cord in the pale yellow. You'll want about 2 yards. And what we're going to do with these little guys here is we're just going to bring them under, up, and through, and kind of just leave them there for a moment, because what we're going to do is weave it into the next pattern. So at the midway point, I've folded my Chinese knotting cord in half, making sure I have really clean fingers because I don't want to dye my cord while I'm working with it. Bringing it behind all of my cords. And the herringbone stitch is very simple. Actually, what you're going to do is you're going to bring the right side and you're going to bring it up. Whoops. You're going to bring it up, over, and through the legs. So over the right leg, under the left, and then you're going to do the exact opposite with the other side. So you're going to take the left hand side, you're going to go over the left cords, through, down through the legs, and up. I'm going to pull my little tough cord tails taut, and the pattern will repeat. So my right side is going to go up over the right cords, down through the legs, left cord, going to go up over my right cords, left cords, under my right cords, and pull tight. I'm going to repeat that for about an inch or so before we start to use these cords to just ladder on our 6/0 seed beads. Now the one thing you'll notice is with these 6/0 Miyuki seed beads, the holes will accommodate both of these cords, which are 0.8, but it'll be nice, it'll be kind of snug. So I like to take my thread burner and just taper the ends. So what I'm doing is dragging my cord along the wand as it's heating, and it kind of melts the fibers together. You can kind of take your fingers and make it a little more stiff, and that kind of creates a self needle. I'm going to do that to both sides, and then I'm going to just go into my laddering. Take my right cord here, and I'm going to go through my seed bead. I'm going to take my left cord and go through the opposite direction, pulling taut. Now you'll see how it's going to pop up. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to go in between the legs, down in between the legs. We're going to be kind of reversing this pattern. So instead of going around, under, and up, we're going to go around, down, and through. I'm going to slide one more bead on. So, pops up, so we're going to bring both tails down through the legs, under and through. You can see the pattern starting to form. I'm going to repeat that for maybe 4 or 5 more beads, and then I'm going to go back into my herringbone stitch just as before. Now I've gotten to the point in my bracelet where, let's see if we were going to travel this journey again. We've got our loop done, we have our first laddering portion complete, and then we moved on to the mood bead transition, carrying on the ladder pattern once more, micro macrame, and then herringbone into a ladder stitch. If you're at this point in the bracelet, you should give yourself a pat on the back because you're over halfway finished. So now what we're going to do is transition back into a micro macrame knot, which is what we've been doing before, just the same macrame, but this time we're going to be adding beads and beginning the macrame process around all 4 of these cords. I've cut my yard of tough cord, bending it in half, kind of just leaving these tails right here for a moment. And we're going to bring this tough cord up underneath all of those cords at the midway point and begin the macrame process over all of those cords, treating them all as base cords. Here's a little bit better view of what we're doing. We're doing a flat knot over all 4 of these cords, weaving in our herringbone tails. So alternating sides. P, Q. I'm going to do that for a few stitches to create a nice transition. And then I'm going to string on whatever side the little vertical bump is that you would be doing a knot with. I'm going to take that cord right here, so in this case it's going to be my right side, and I'm going to string on my beads just on that one cord. And I'm going to string on 14 of the Miyuki seed beads. As you can see, I've strung my 14 beads up, and I strung them on the right side only, and then towards the end of my right side of my cord, my right tail, I created a stopper by tying a knot, or basically bringing the cord back around and through the very last bead to create a bead stopper so my beads don't fly anywhere. You can also just tie it in a knot. So what I'm going to do is the side with the vertical bump. I'm going to begin my Bollywood pattern, which is what I like to call the Bollywood pattern anyway. Dragging one bead down, macrame in the P position. Now we're going to drop a bead down because it's going to be on the other side. And we're going to macrame in the Q position. So we've got 2 beads on there. I like to give it some space, so I'm going to do 2 plain stitches without dropping any beads. So 1, 2. Now I'm going to drop a bead. 1, drop a bead, 2 plain stitches next. Drop a bead. Drop a bead. I made my section probably about 1 inch long. That's what it looks like when it's all finished. I transitioned with some plain stitches afterwards and then went right back into a new herringbone wrap and repeated exactly what I did with the pale yellow section with the darker rust color here. And I'm going to go ahead and breeze through that because I know you already know how to do that. So the next point will be at the end of the next herringbone transition when we go back into the Bollywood stitch. There, we're almost done with this bracelet. What I'm going to do is now transition using my tuff cord into that Bollywood pattern that we did. I'm going to bring one of our mood beads, one of the mirage beads, up through all of those cords. And as you can see here with the tuff cord, I just went around this bead and continued to macrame. As you can see, we're nearly done. We just have a final herringbone section in the mustard yellow to do. As you can see, I reversed the order of these beads. I wasn't intentional, but I just went with it anyway. And I took this thing off the board and tried it on just to make sure that I was on the right track as far as sizing. You're going to constantly want to do that. Now it's time to take the remaining color I have, which is this beautiful mustard yellow. And what I've done here is just added a little bit of glue to the end, to my last knot on the tuff cord, and then I brought all 4 cords through a mirage bead. Now what I'm going to do is just snip these away. We don't need to deal with those. And I'm going to take my last 2 yards of Chinese knotting cord that I have and bend it in half and go ahead and do this entire section until my desired length is reached. You're going to make this final section long enough to finish the bracelet. So in other words, if you have a larger wrist than me, if you have like a 7.5, which is about average, or an 8-inch wrist, you're going to probably want to just herringbone a little bit further down. Now we're at the point where we're going to add our button on, but before I do that, I'm going to transition from a herringbone knot to a macrame knot, a flat macrame knot with my Chinese knotting cord here. So I'm going to do 2 plain stitches, and then I'm going to take this off the board and I'm going to slide my button on both pieces of leather. And I slid my button up my leather, and I'm going to continue just macrameing around the button like it's not there. Maybe 2. And before I tie up this last one, I'm going to take my hypo cement and I'm going to add a drop of glue right in here for the cord to dry over, just as a precaution. Tighten that up. I'm going to let that dry. Thread burn off these remaining parts. Final stage, I've taken my design off the board here. I'm going to take my last 2 little mirage beads and I'm going to slide one onto each tail. And I'm going to kind of figure out where I want it. 1 inch here. And I'm going to just kind of mark that with my finger. Holding that in place, I'm going to do an overhand knot, scrunching it down, making sure it's right where I want it to be, and then bringing this tail back up through the hole of that bead. Just like so. Repeat on the other side. Take your shears, trim it. Your bracelet is complete. And here we are. We have reached the final part, the best part. Now we can wear it.